Hello and welcome to our Women's Informal Network webinar on guilt and how women feel, process and manage guilt. My name is Marilena Heinrich and I am one of the coordinators of the Women's Informal Network. And today I'm very pleased to have here with us one of our members, actually, Sonja Jankovic. Sonja is an Australian and Swiss registered psychologist and psychotherapist and trainer. That has worked for over a decade now in various public and private settings with people across the lifespan. She has been working with UN organizations, including FAO, during the last 4 years and is currently working as a staff counselor for IOM. Sonja has a sort of holistic style and approach when it comes to therapy, as she works by incorporating the values that an individual has with a wide range of therapeutic approaches that will assist them in meeting their goals. And she is trained in cognitive behavior therapy, mindfulness, acceptance and commitment therapy, EMDR, and clinical hypnosis. Welcome, Sonja. We're very happy to have you here today with us. And so the topic of guilt is something very recurrent that we're talking about in our meetings and aperitivos. And this is not only concerning moms or working moms, but women in general. We do have very often that sense of guilt. So when we are at work, we feel that we should be supporting our families more. When we are with the families, we feel that we should really be at work. And so how to deal with this sense of guilt that can sometimes also really eat us up from inside. And this is what we will hear today from Sonja. So I would like to hand over to Sonja. She will give us a presentation. It will be an interactive presentation. So that's why I also asked you to stay on camera if you can. You can also use the chat during the presentation of Sonja. And then we will also have a moment of sharing and questions and answers after Sonja's presentation. Sonja, over to you. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Marilena. Welcome, ladies. Thank you so much for coming today. I know many of you are giving up your lunch, but please, if you need to eat something, I know I get very hangry if I don't eat. So I had a snack before this. So please be welcome to eat something, get a coffee, get a tea. There is no problem whatsoever. Make yourself comfortable. So the real aim of today is to explore, why do women tend to feel so much more guilty than men? What are some of the reasons behind this? What are some of the examples, and how can we change this? How can we change this and feel a little bit more in control? So just making sure that everybody can see my screen now.
Yes, we can.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. And so we are no strangers to the last 2.5 years. It has been a whirlwind and still continues to be, let's say, of prolonged uncertainty. And this has been highlighted. This is highlighted even more so, the relationship that we have with ourselves when we are sometimes left alone to be with our thoughts, and perhaps the relationships that we have with people around us, be it our colleagues, our family members, partners, anybody. And we found ourselves probably now more than ever trying to balance everything: our health, our work, just like Marilena said, families, interests, hobbies, taking care of ourselves, taking care of others, all in these different confined environments. And sometimes it seems as though we've set ourselves up almost with an impossible task. And so really, what I wanted to focus on today was the quality of the relationships that we have, whether they be the relationships with others or the relationship that we have with ourselves. Because the quality of these relationships, they determine the quality of our lives or your lives. And so the quality also of these relationships determine how we achieve things during the day, how we manage setbacks, what gives our life a sense of purpose, a sense of meaning. And I will also be reflecting on the bi-directional relationship between our thoughts and our relationships with ourselves and with others, because unfortunately or fortunately, we cannot separate our mind from the body. And so the first thing that I want to look at is, how do we do relationships? And so what is the cause of sometimes these bad feelings that we tend to get over and over again? So sometimes we're also triggered by certain things and we don't really know why. So I ask you today to be open to some introspection, starting first with perhaps identifying some patterns in your thinking and your relationships with yourself and with others, and beginning to ask yourself, why am I thinking or feeling this way? Where is this coming from? What is my motivation? What is my fear? When did I first become aware of it? And often it's much earlier than what we think. And so I'm not sure if anyone here, but probably yes, has heard of this concept called attachment. Some probably yes, some probably no, or some, I guess, in various forms, depending what you like to read. And so this is a term that was coined in the 50s to explain that we seek or avoid intimacy along a continuum. But one of these 3 or 4 styles is generally predominant when we are dating or when we're in a long-term relationship, or where any relationship, whether that be romantic or whether that be friends-based, it doesn't really matter. And so half the population tends to have something called secure attachment. So that means that they don't mind if they're alone or if they are with people, they feel quite good. 20% of the people tend to be anxious. So that means when they're alone or when they're with someone, or avoidant. That means not really interested in getting too deep into a relationship. There are also combinations. So some people can be secure, but also a little bit anxious, or let's say anxious and avoidant. And it's absolutely normal to have a mix of more than one. So perhaps you can start to reflect just a tiny bit, maybe on what your style may be. And different partners or different friends or different colleagues may also trigger different parts of your attachment style. So that is how you do relationships. And so then this brings me to this point. When do you think you first felt intense guilt or intense negative emotion? You can probably think of a couple of examples, even in your childhood, perhaps even at school when somebody made you feel bad, a teacher or a parent or a peer. Maybe you were bullied, maybe somebody teased you for something, or maybe you did something that you were not meant to do. So usually it's some kind of an authority figure in our developmental years that, as a result of us doing something X, they usually withdrew their attention, their love, and their affection in order to teach us a lesson, in order for us to learn that we are doing something that is not socially acceptable, that is wrong. Perhaps you can also start to reflect on, during your developmental years, how were you parented? How were you parented? What was valued? What was considered good in your household? What is even now considered good in your household? What kinds of these values and behaviors have you brought in your everyday life? What behavior of yours was rewarded? What behavior was punished? And we tend to take these things for granted because we bring them along in our everyday life. We tend to teach our children the same things. We tend to be attracted to similar partners that are sometimes very compatible to what our parents were like, even though sometimes we really want to avoid this, because whatever is familiar, we tend to be drawn to, even if this sense of familiarity is not good for us. Even if logically speaking, we don't want it, we just tend to be swayed to whatever is familiar. It tends to feel good. And so guilt, what is guilt? So I really like this quote. I did something I shouldn't, or didn't do something I should have. So I feel bad, and there are negative results. So it's this feeling of feeling bad. It's this over-encompassing feeling that we have. And so compared to men, women are much more likely to have feelings of guilt. Women are much more likely to feel the guilt more intensely. They are also 60% more likely to provide unpaid care, usually due to having a sense of duty or feeling guilty. How many ladies here have probably provided care, let's say maybe to their mother-in-law or somebody that they felt bad for, felt sorry for, or felt great empathy for, even though that was probably going outside of your comfort zone or your area of expertise, or even really what you wanted to do, but you kind of just did it anyway? How many women have sacrificed their health to provide care to someone else as a result of guilt or as a result of this like overinflated sense of duty? I'm putting my hand up to all of these things. So we are also twice as more likely compared to men to sacrifice our health. How many ladies have chosen, oh, maybe I'll just do this for work or do this for my partner instead, or for my friend instead of having lunch? I'll just skip that. And then skipping it once turns into a habit. Or I'll just skip going to the hairdresser. It's just so small. I don't need that. And how many of us have already felt, it's just on 12, felt guilty today for something that we think we should have done or could have done or would have done? So there is always something.
Sonia?
Yes?
We have a question in the chat related to these points that you have put here from Laura. What is an explanation for this? Are you going to get there or otherwise? Now, thanks.
Thank you, Laura. Yes, I'm coming to that. It is coming there. And so when I say also guilt and that women are much more likely to sacrifice themselves, their needs and their wants, there are also different types of guilt that people experience. So whether that be feeling mum guilt and that comparison that Magdalena made, or survivor's guilt, people often also find that after a trauma. If you have survived in a car accident or something else and the other person didn't, or if somebody died, even in natural circumstances, but you didn't. So there are many, many different types of guilt that we can experience on any given time. And so first, before we get to the why, I wanted to ask, what does guilt mean to you now that we've looked at some examples? What does guilt mean to you? So someone also said here,
we have a comment saying that this is a vicious circle. Skipping working out, for example, so that I can be with the kids, then I feel guilty that I did not exercise. And hands up, how many of us feel like that? And then we have a question. What's the difference between guilt and feeling responsibility? Mm-hmm. Maybe you will be touching upon that, Sonia. And Miki says, doing something that the family, friends, partner do not like. Guilt to me means that I have not done enough on my part. Guilt is failing. Guilt to me is an overwhelming feeling that I can't seem to escape. I feel it's compromising and I feel failure. Guilt, a feeling of inadequacy. Guilt is self-destroy. Guilt means should have or not done something because there are consequences for others or myself. Not behaving as others would expect. In some cultures, guilt is a means for raising children. Mm-hmm. Letting people down. Wow. Guilt is doing something I want instead of doing something I need to do or should be doing. Putting my needs before the needs of my loved ones. So we have plenty of examples here, I think. How to reduce guilt as a single mom when I have to do everything. Mm-hmm. Judeo-Christian guilt.
And so trying to encompassing all of these different things together, they just keep coming. Guilt is pleasing others, but not pleasing yourself, okay? Irish Catholic guilt as well. So you've started to think about where do these thoughts come from? Where do they come from? Where do they originally come from? Because we are not born guilty. We are not born thinking, oh, I should put my needs above, below that of others. We're not born that way. So society, our family, our friends, whether it be also certain networks that we're part of, such religion, such as work, shape the thoughts that we have. And why do they do that? Why do they do that? It's a means of modifying behavior. Whether it's modifying our own behavior or modifying that of somebody else, we have been taught through different various means from when we were young that this is a very easy way to modify our behavior and to shape it. Other people have shaped our behavior using guilt, so it's extremely effective. Our daily feeling, guilt for being a working mum, guilty for doing things for me, guilty for living work early, not seeing friends, discrepancy between the mind and actions or heart-oriented actions. It's imposed more on girls and women. And so the thing is with guilt as well, so we also have certain belief when it comes to guilt. So people have also mentioned this, like, if I don't feel guilty, maybe I won't get these things done for my family. If I don't feel guilty, maybe that means it's something wrong with me. If I don't feel guilty, maybe I'm not following the teachings of my religion or my institution or my work, because surely that guilt is signaling that something's wrong with me or that I'm doing something wrong. But we tend to kind of get muddled in with what your emotions are saying and what your mind is thinking. There seems to be a discrepancy because you might know logically, rationally, I'm not doing anything wrong, but these feelings, this thing on the inside is telling you that something doesn't feel right, that you don't feel good. And so how do we bring these things more together? So that's how we're starting to pick this apart. And generally what people have said is that there is this inflated sense of accountability and responsibility. So I always tell people, if there is a pie and it is a responsibility pie, and if you're feeling guilty about something, out of, let's say this pie has 8 slices, how many slices belong to you? And usually at the beginning of the conversation, people say, oh, 5 of those 8 slices belong to me. But then we start to talk about, okay, who else maybe needs to have a piece of that pie? Your boss, your friend, the person you're taking care of, society, other religious institutions. Who else is involved in this social network that deserves this pie, a slice of this pie? And at the end, normally it's just 1 slice out of 8 that belongs to you. So start to look at your responsibility pie. How many of these slices really belong to you? Do you need to be in control of all of them? I guess control is a different topic. And so some common themes when it comes to guilt is constantly worrying that you've upset others. And why do we do that? I'll get to that in a second. I'm just unraveling it slowly. It's analyzing if you could have done things better. The coulda, the shoulda, the wouldas. It's feeling bad for the things you didn't even do. I didn't go for my run, or I didn't make it to see that friend, or maybe I can just do this. And it's often letting sometimes one small thing convince you that you did something really poorly. That inner self-critic comes out. Oh, Sonia, you really should have done this. You're not the best worker, are you? You're not going to get that promotion, etc., etc. And perhaps it's also belief that if things are not going well, it's down to something you must have done. Yes, someone wants to say something? I hear something. Noise? Okay, I thought I heard some noises. Maybe that's just my computer.
No, I think someone unmuted. I muted the person.
Mm-hmm. And it's never ending. That's right. There's coulda, shoulda, woulda, but it keeps us in this loop. And like, what is this loop? It's our thought processes. These are the thoughts that we buy into. So where did these come from? Was there someone in your family that kept saying to you, oh, you really should have done this, or you really could have done this, but you didn't? And by saying this to you, were they able to modify your behavior so then you did something that they really wanted you to do? So where did this come from? Think about this. Was it your boss? Was it a friend? Was it a parent? Normally it is. I'm not blaming everything on the parents, but normally it is a parent, or let's say an older adult. back when we were children or we were adults, telling us to do certain things and using our emotions as a way of very quickly and easily getting us to change into a more desirable behavior that they desired. And so reflect a little bit as well on, what does guilt do to you? So people are sending these thought processes are never ending. It doesn't feel good. Lots of women hide. They have a lack of self-respect after a while. They have a fear of punishment. How many of us want to avoid confrontation or an argument? So we just do things even though we don't really want to sometimes. But then what happens if you keep doing something you don't really want to do? We feel angry. We get resentful. And resentment is that kind of long-term anger that boils inside of you, where you get really annoyed over a long period of time, where you get really, really cynical. That's right. We start resenting the person, the thing, and then feeling guilty for resenting that person. Yes, it can lead to arguments with your loved ones, because when we keep pushing down our needs, our wants, and our desires, that energy, that has to go somewhere. It has to come out at some kind of point. For some people, it comes out in terms of anger. For other people, in terms of maybe they need to be physically active, drinking, overeating. It has to come out somehow. Also, it can come out of left field. That's right, and completely explode, especially if you're ignoring it, pushing it down. It will come out in some kind of way. We cannot separate the mind and the body. So then you keep doing things, and you, as someone said, you feel unappreciated, then you feel resentful, then you blow up, and then what happens? You don't really want to do that. And of course, getting sick. And so we often kind of go underground when we feel guilty. We fear this like way of being exposed or rejected. So then maybe we even isolate ourselves. And some people can even feel shame. Shame can drive us away from the things and the people that we love. So that feeling of shame is like really yucky. Who's felt shame? It feels yucky. But we need to have shame. And we've developed it as humans as a social compass. Because if you feel shame, that means you're doing something wrong in your social circle. And back in the day, thousands of years ago, we relied on groups much more in a different way than we do now. So if you were ejected out of a social group, you probably weren't going to get any portion of the meat or the berries that were hunted that day, and you were probably going to die. And that same feeling is still there now. So that's in the back of our brain, almost as closely related as to automatic processes such as breathing, is this anxiety and this feeling of shame that we're going to be rejected. So before, if we were rejected, that probably meant certain death. Now, not so much. There are different ways of connected, but it doesn't matter. This process is still there. And so we tend to overload ourselves. And so why do we experience guilt? Why and where does it come from? And so it is the brain's way of making sure that we don't veer into behavior that will leave us ostracized, as I said, from the tribe, whatever your tribe may be. And even nowadays, having a little bit of guilt can be a good thing, and not having any at all, so not having any empathy, any regard for others, can be a sign that you might be a sociopath or have some kind of a narcissistic personality disorder. And we have all met people that don't seem to have any kind of empathy or regard for others. And so they don't really care about being part of this tribe. It's a small percentage of people, but they are there. So lots of those people are overrepresented in prisons. So they don't really care if they hurt others, commit robbery, etc. So they don't really have a sense of empathy or much of a sense of guilt. And also, why do we feel guilty? Why were we made to feel guilty when we were children? It provided us with an incentive to apologize, reflect on what we did wrong, to correct our mistakes, and to behave responsibly. It also served to preserve the social bonds that we had, avoid harm to others. However, guilt can still be this negative feeling, especially if you are engaging in it all the time. So what else does it lead to? So in a nutshell, we all want to be liked. We all want to be liked. All of us, unless you're a sociopath, completely. We all want to be liked. So through cultural conditioning, through our parents, through society, through school, through university, through our work contacts, it's cultural conditioning. We've learned that we can achieve the best emotional safety by belonging, having your own tribe or 2 or 3 or 4 or more, and being likable. So we spend a lot of energy in pleasing, in making other people happy, and putting our needs somewhere down the bottom. And also, if you're female, we are much more likely to be orientated towards people pleasing compared to men. So when others aren't happy, when others perceive something is wrong that we haven't done, we perceive that we have failed. We then perceive, or our body automatically perceives, that we are in danger of being rejected, criticized, thereby losing our place of belonging. And this spins us out into disaster. This all happens in mere seconds. These are mechanisms that have been in place for, dare I say, hundreds of thousands of years. So we have to learn how to live with them and how to manage them. We can't just change them overnight, but we can understand why and where this is coming from. And sometimes that's enough, between having the experience, having that feeling of feeling guilty, and just stepping back a little bit and being able to see the situation for really what it is. And so there is a question here. I wonder why men don't feel guilt to an extent as women do. Okay, so I will also come to that. And so that's this question here. And so it's nature versus nurture. So women tend to be more agreeable when personality tests are done compared to men. Think about it. Men biologically are diverse and different. They tend to have much more testosterone. It enables them to be more aggressive and less empathetic in general terms overall. Women in general tend to value also relationships much more than men. Who has the child? Who has to go through that burden for 9 months? It's women. So we are genetically and biologically developed to have this immediate attachment or caregiving attachment to this being that we're meant to be having. Not everybody chooses to have one. That's something else. But this is the way that we have been built. So there are, I don't know, now this is a controversial topic, gender differences, does gender exist, etc. But there are some biological differences that can explain as to why women tend to be, not all, but tend to be more wired this way. There are ways that we can mitigate and modify this, but this is just to explain as to why. So men also, due to also these different combinations of hormones, they tend to feel, they feel guilt as well, just less intensely than women. It's just the way that evolution made us. And so as the women are the caregivers, we generally have a greater capacity for empathy, because why? Guilt depends on empathy. How empathetic you are depends also on how guilty you are. And we need empathy to be able to respond to the needs of others. Voila. The needs of others being caring for others, caring for children, caring for other people in our tribe. Men traditionally speaking, last thousands of years did not kind of do that. So they developed in a different way in general. And so some questions to ask yourself, given everything that we've talked about. Look, just think about some standards that are producing your guilt. Where do these standards come from? Did you learn them? Do they come from you, or do they come from external sources? What are the products of these standards? Are you even aware that you're following certain standards? Is there a standard that you want to live by, but are there other standards that perhaps are not really relevant to you, that are not useful? Is your guilt a fact, or is it a feeling? So just like when people say to me, I feel like I'm not doing a good job, that's not a feeling. That is, I'm thinking I'm not doing a good job, and that makes me feel inadequate, negative, sad, anxious, etc. So separate your thoughts from your feelings. It's much harder than what it seems. Okay, parental expectations that just become personal expectations. And I suppose where did those parental expectations come from? So these are some standards, let's say, family or origin standards. We tend to repeat what we learn from our parents. It's only natural. My mum is my standard, but she had a very different life to me. So it's in an unrealistic standard. Okay. So we're starting to become aware of, where did these standards come from? What did people model to us as we were growing up? What was considered good, or something that we should strive to or aspire to be? Also, has anybody ever been sent on a guilt trip by somebody where I've said they've maybe withdrawn their love or affection or their attention? So we find out very quickly, even as kids, or who has done this to their children, to their partner, to their friend, kind of ignored them a little bit because you were angry with them but didn't want to tell them. So we find out very quickly, even as children, that if we want to influence someone, or let's say manipulate them, we can. And the easiest way is to induce guilt. For example, you don't love me, buy me that toy, prove it. Don't go to this event, prove me that you love me. Why do you spend so much time with your friends? Oh, you're kind of leaving the office early today at 5. You're not doing a good enough job. Do you mind earning it, leaving a bit later? We've all been in these situations, and we've also done it ourselves, inducing guilt in others to get what we want. So someone's saying, I do worry about making sure I don't pass this guilt I have for everything onto my own children. It's tricky. The thing is that we all have the capacity to feel this different range of emotions, these different spectrums of emotions. So don't be afraid of that. But it's up to us to be able to regulate ourselves. And I guess to teach those that are unable to how to regulate themselves, and to be aware of their thoughts, to be aware of their feelings, and not just to accept them for what they are, but to perhaps be critical and to question why, where did this come from? So I don't know if you knew also, children begin to feel guilt, let's say, and try to make up for guilt-inducing acts by the time that they are 2. So they experience guilt and want to make up for not doing a good enough job by the time that they're 2. So we're wired to feel this way, or let's say to be hypersensitive to us not being a good job, so to us not doing a potentially good job, or being pushed out of the tribe. So this happens super early on in life. So you can see how this all comes together. Think about also maybe some legal standards that we're meant to abide by. Not doing the wrong thing, work standards, societal standards, marketing. Are we listening to experts? Who are the experts? Are they experts or are they experts? So everybody that writes an article now, even without citing information, can say that experts say that you need to be multitasking every day to make sure that you're doing the right thing, for example. So who are these experts? Where does this advice come from? What do we just seem to be accepting? I really like this one. So this is some marketing for insurance. So bottom line is that guilt sells. We've been conditioned to this feeling. And so marketing companies know this. And so guilt can also be purely consumer oriented, and we're all influenced by it. It's confusing and it can be frightening. And it's not that these products are good or that they're bad. I just want you to kind of consider how much of your guilt is driven by certain standards, and what is the source of these standards? Who wants you to live your life a certain way? So sometimes choosing to deal with our guilt feeling begins with choosing to replace a standard that is producing the guilt. So looking at these 2 ads, you were there to help them stand on their feet. And now you have to choose an insurance that will make sure that they will when you're dead. Your kids love you. Having life insurance proves it's mutual. Immediately it's like ping. Even if you know that this is like silly or ridiculous or anything, it doesn't matter, because it invokes a feeling in you immediately and very, very quickly. So it works. So someone also wrote here in the chat, so there is a balance between ensuring they take responsibility for themselves, the kids, tidy their rooms, contribute to the house, supporting them to make aware and conscious choices. It's tricky, and this balance is really, really tricky. And sometimes we need to have a little bit of empathy for ourselves. Not guilt, but empathy, and I will get that to in a second. And so if you like, you can close your eyes, but you don't have to. But if you can, or just reflect within yourself. So imagine if you took care of yourself as if you were the only person that was responsible on this planet for taking care of you, nobody else. What does that look like? I know that sounds strange. So imagine that you're the only person on the planet that's responsible for taking care of you. What does that look like? A dream. What are you doing? But no one else is responsible for taking care of you but you. What kind of things are you saying to yourself if you're responsible for yourself, for your thoughts? What does it look like when you come across tough times? Because you will. And despite this, and despite your suffering, what do you say to yourself to get through this? Now I'm feeling guilty for guilting my boys. we all do it to modify behavior. It's completely normal, and so children should have some kind of a sense of guilt or what's right or what's wrong. So be gentle on yourself. So it looks like I'm resting more. Okay, then what does that rest look like? Is it active rest, passive rest?
We have an interesting comment.
Please.
Someone is saying, confession time. I have deliberately guilted my daughter, less so my son, and reflecting about it.
Okay.
That's interesting how we react differently to sons and daughters when we are raising them, no? And I would like, if I may, Sonia, from my side, personally, I thought that was very interesting when you said empathy for ourselves. And I would like to quote another WIN member who also participated as a co-author of our You Matter book, Wadzanai Garve. She always says and lives by the ABC. Attend to your basic needs with compassion. And I love this ABC because I really think in a short sentence, it encompasses what you're saying, that we also have to be compassionate with ourselves and sometimes carve out that time without feeling guilty. So I wanted to share that with all of you.
That's really beautiful. And even if you do feel guilty, that's okay. It's a feeling. And, maybe you can also ask yourself, can I let go of that for now? Can I put that on ice? Can I put that thought on ice, that feeling on ice for 15 minutes? If not for 15, for 5 minutes. Can you do that? I'm sure you can. You can. You're completely capable. You're much more capable than what you think you are. And also to comment on what somebody said, we will go for the tactic that works best for that person. And so we know how guilt works in ourselves. So we can use it more with, let's say, female colleagues, with our mum, with our friend, with a daughter. So we know what works with them to modify their behavior. Perhaps with a male child or with our partner or with a friend or a colleague, something else might work. So we go down that path. So we will do what we can with the knowledge that we have to try and modify this person's behavior to suit us and our agenda and what we want. So that's quite natural. Just look at perhaps how that is affecting them and yourself as well. Is there another way perhaps of doing that, getting their behavior to change? Because we all want to influence and change other people's behavior, but it's super, super difficult. And also, so my other question to you, can you imagine yourself in 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, if instead of avoiding the things you know you need to do for yourself, if you did them every single day? What would happen? Think of something so tiny, so small that you have been avoiding. Is it a conversation? Is it an email? Is it going for a walk? Is it having a coffee by yourself? What is it? Do it today. Something so, so tiny, something so small. Choose it and do it today. Something so, so small. And like I said, whatever we find familiar, we tend to be attracted towards or go towards. And whatever we find not familiar, we tend to kind of push away. So if you're finding things, doing good things for yourself that you know are going to influence you in a positive way, if that is unfamiliar to you, you're not going to do it because it feels weird. It feels weird to do it. Oh, it's so weird shopping by myself. Oh, it's weird having coffee by myself. Well, it's weird taking time out by myself, not being with my partner or my children or my work friends. Okay. So what is that small thing that you can do every day? Okay, maybe it's a skincare routine. Maybe there's something you can introduce every day. Maybe it's something to do with your body that makes you feel good, that makes you feel strong. Perhaps it's like someone said, taking time off screen, reading a book, being outdoors. Choose one thing, 5 minutes, and do it every day. Put it in your calendar and do it every day. Just some small, tiny thing. Because when you care for yourself, and we all know this, but we don't do it, other people benefit. Imagine if all the people that are, this is like very extreme. Imagine, and we all know this person, perhaps it's at work or perhaps it's at school, that kind of didn't turn out to have a very good life, or maybe they were very angry or they were bullied. What happens to people that are bullied? At some point, they get really resentful, they get angry, and they lose it. Sometimes they turn to crime. They end up in jail. In extreme circumstances, they do school shootings. Okay, this is like an extreme example. Did they engage in self-care and in activities that were maybe good for them? Probably not so much. So caring for yourself means caring for other people. I know this is an extremely out there example, but it reverberates when you care for yourself. And so catch your inner self-critic as well. We all have this inner self-critic. When we get caught in this guilt and self-attack, ruminating on our guilt, we abandon the possibility of purposefully being able to address what isn't working. We look into these like uncomfortable narratives of our feelings. We get distracted by the important question of how do we improve what isn't working? What do? We get stuck in this loop of being shamed and guilty. We end up in the same old question, what's wrong with me? It's the question we all know too well, what's wrong with me? Why am I not more this? Why am I not more that? I'm just not enough. Something is just wrong with me. Something is just not good. And so what can you do? I want you to catch your self-critic. If you have a pen, even in your phone, I want you to write the name of your self-critic. What is it? Is it a story? We'll use this in a second. What is this self-critic? Is it mum's voice? Is it dad's voice? Is it auntie so-and-so's voice? Is it a teacher's voice? Just think about this in a second. So how do you break then this inner cycle and change your inner narrative and your critic? So name your inner critic. I want you to do that first and foremost. Give it a name. Is it that old record player? Is it a radio station? Guilty FM? What is it? So awareness starts by noticing in small ways the ways that you blame yourself, the ways that you personally dive into the guilty rabbit hole. And when you notice yourself falling, start catching yourself mid-dive or even pre-dive. Then feel how the situation feels. Where is it in your body? We can't separate our mind from our bodies. How do you know when somebody around you is not feeling good? Usually it's on the outside. There is something going on. Ask your family, ask your friends, how do you know when I'm not feeling so good? What kind of things am I exhibiting? How do you know? They're usually more aware than we are sometimes. Turn your attention to the now. What can you do to improve your situation that's not working? Focus from what you think is wrong with you to the present moment and how you can create a positive change. And when guilt becomes a habit, it causes suffering and stagnation. But it's something that we can break, and we don't have to throw ourselves under the bus when something goes wrong. And also watch the kind of words and the kinds of things that you're telling yourself. I'm broken, I'm no good, I can't do this, I can't do that, if only I'm not good enough. Catch yourself. You have to, it's kind of like little black negative butterflies, and you have to catch it, because sometimes they just fly around and we're not even aware of it. And someone said here, it's such a fine line. Not doing anything your first grade teacher wouldn't approve of. I like that one a lot. And so just like I said before, so get your own piece of paper. So this is something that you're going to keep with you. And I want you to name that inner voice, that inner self-critic, the one that tells you, oh, you should feel bad about not doing this, or you should feel bad about doing that. This is the last thing that we will touch up upon today. And what I want you to do is write down some of the old thoughts that this critic tells you. You should be doing this. You should be doing that. Just write down a couple of things on your phone or this little piece of paper. See, people are writing a lot. Wow, there are many thoughts that people have.
I think the list can go on and on.
The list can go on and on, but usually there are some very similar themes. You should be exercising more. You're not good enough. You need to spend more time with the kids. You need to spend more time exercising. You need to spend more time at work. You're really, really slow. Okay, whatever they are, these are your thoughts. These are some of my thoughts that I prepared earlier. And then if it's a physical piece of paper, you can just fold that. And then you can label it on the inside or on the outside what that critic might be, what that name is. I don't know if anybody else in the chat wants to share a name of their inner critic, whoever it might be. Mine is like, I suck FM. That's mine. I don't know if anybody wants to share the name of their critic. But I want you to keep this paper. Yours is called Devil. Okay. Someone's is called Devil. Very, very strong. Never enough. Very nice. I love it. Anybody else? Okay. So I want you to keep this paper with yourself. If it's a physical piece of paper, try harder. Hashtag. Very good. So I keep mine in here. In my phone. It's in here. Mrs. Do Better. Very nice. And so now, during the course of the week, today, next several days, / forever, I want you to keep that story with you. I want you to cultivate awareness when that inner self-critic activates itself. It might be 10,000 times a day. It doesn't matter. And then I want you to take that out. Maybe there are some new self-critique thoughts that there are. And I want you to just add them to this list. And eventually you will stop adding them because they will all be the same or going on to similar themes. Then whenever you have these thoughts, this self-critic comes out, I want you to say to yourself, there's that hashtag try harder. Oh, there's that, never enough story. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, there it is. Take it out. Oh, thank you so much for that. That's lovely. Great. And then put it back and go on with the rest of your day. I want you to cultivate awareness and provide some distance between your thoughts and your beliefs and what you need to be doing. We need to be extracting some of these inner critic voices outside and to be aware of our inner critic. Who is this? Do we need to listen to it all the time? It's kind of like having the angel and the devil on the shoulder, imposter Lily. There's that imposter story. Oh, that's interesting. Can we just leave it there and do then whatever else is valuable to us? So have it on hand, and it's much easier if it's something physical that you can touch, that you can remind yourself of, even if it's in your pocket or if it's in your phone. It's your story. It's your self-critic story. Everybody has one. But can you provide some distance between yourself and your thoughts and your story and still do what matters to you? You can do it. Give it a go. So some people that I've done this with have had this for years. That same piece of paper, it turns into nothing after a couple of years that it's been in their phone or their pocket or their wallet. But it's important to label it and to provide some distance between yourself and this self-critic story, this inner critic story that we have. So feel free to reach out to me to my email. Let me know how you got on. I'm happy to answer any other questions. And I think I'm doing pretty good with my timing. It leaves time for more questions. And that was it. That was just a quick overview.
Thank you so much, Sonia. A round of applause for you and for this very inspiring presentation. I have taken notes and I think in particular to take distance from those thoughts or beliefs of the inner critic is something very critical, important for us so that we can detach and not be eaten up by our inner guilt. So now we have a chance for a few more minutes to discuss. If you would like to raise any point, question you may have, or thoughts that came up, or suggestions of how we can even further detach from our thoughts or beliefs, please do so. The floor is open. You can either raise your hand or you can write in the chat. I can see a comment. Thank you so much. Great to take some time for me on this topic and not feel guilty about taking time to do it. Indeed, the choice to do this as a lunchtime seminar was precisely because we thought that after work, it would probably create guilt feelings. And so we chose the lunchtime seminar on purpose. Are there any thoughts from your side? Do you have more questions than before? Fleur, please, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much. I think it's been really helpful to give some vocabulary and space for reflection. So one of the areas that I'm thinking about more is, do we have guilt because the expectations in the home are unfair? And this resentment that builds up, like some of it is a mental game, but some of it's also practical, like we need to actually renegotiate some of the balance and the roles that we take on, because women are still carrying the care burden in many situations and so forth. So I just wondered if you had any reflections on that. And there's actually a documentary called Fair Play, which has been developed by the US, and we're going to screen it in Geneva in December. And we can put anyone in other hubs in touch with the people who have the film rights. It's quite US centric, but I think it does provoke discussion. So that's just one thought on, bridging that gap between what expectations are fair and what we can actually deliver on and be happy and make sure the children are fed and at school and
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Fleur. So how much is it a matter that we have to negotiate with our context, Sonia? What do you think?
I think that's an excellent point that Fleur made. First, have awareness of what those thoughts are and what things you want to negotiate and maybe where they come from. What source do you need to go to? Do you need to negotiate something perhaps at work or within the home or socially? And then start with your negotiating process. Normally it's things that we have been avoiding that has been making us feel uncomfortable. What does resentment feel like for you? Feel it during the next week, and that will probably signal to you that something needs to change. And it might be a little bit difficult to catch that old feelings because it's just been something that's just been there and we've never maybe questioned it. So also, if you can't think of it, ask others that are close to you. Maybe you brought up themes, so they say, oh, look, you've really been feeling annoyed about this for such a long time. Do you think maybe something needs to change? Right? Is there something? So involve others that you trust in these conversations. I think it's very important to also negotiate and to have open conversations, especially where you've been feeling disenfranchised.
Very good point. Sometimes others see things that we don't see and can support us and help us. Chitra Deshpande, the founder of the Women's Informal Network. The floor is yours, Chitra.
Oh, thank you. And thank you, Sonia, for this great session. I think it really resonates. I mean, at one point, as you said, it physically feel it. I was feeling very uncomfortable. I was feeling all this stress in my neck as you discussed guilt, I think. And just to say that very much resonates. It's interesting because I've been having chats with my son about guilt because he's like, he feels other emotions, he said he feels embarrassed. I say, I don't feel embarrassed, but I feel guilt. Guilt is like, that's my emotion, like the driving. And I think I mentioned, again, Asian culture, it's how you control your children. And there's a lot of guilt that's sort of built into like expectations, I think, in terms of care. So I think there are a lot of societal guilt that I think I was certainly raised with. But it was interesting because recently, I think for many of us, we're perhaps working mothers. And I think there are these societal expectations as mothers, you have to bake for the bake sale and you need to do all, you still have to like prepare your children, make sure they're fine. But while you're working, and I must say, I cope with being a working mom by hiring somebody to take care of a lot of, babysitter, cleaner, etc. And it's interesting because I often get comments from my mother-in-law, and I think there are also these like in Switzerland, they call your babysitter the day mother. And you're the night mother. It's like, I mean, it's so like, it's insulting you, right? Guilting you into feeling these ways. But recently I'm just owning all of this. So for example, I have my cleaner, babysitter, bake and I bring in baked goods because I'd like to bring that in for my team to build up the spirit. And they always ask me, oh, you like to bake? And I'm like, no, I did not bake this. It is homemade. It was baked by my cleaner. And I am not ashamed of that. And so I think we just have to, that's how I operate. And there's like, you are benefiting from this. And I do not have to be Wonder Woman. And so anyway, I'm just trying to own that more. But thanks so much.
That's so wonderful.
Yeah, the Wonder Woman syndrome is something that we frequently hear and discuss also. Do we have to be Wonder Woman or don't we have to be Wonder Woman? And if we're not feeling like Wonder Woman, then we feel guilty about not being it. So, and the whole discussion about multitasking and how many tasks you can or should be doing at one time. The multitasking has been given a very positive connotation, but in reality, is it that positive for us? Well, yes, maybe you can achieve more things, but how much does it take in terms of energy and thinking and psychologically, etc.? So I think that one, everyone for oneself needs to assess, no? Okay, I think we are at the hour. So I can see some thank you notes in the chat and comments about maybe we shall stop living up to the image of a superwoman. Exactly. And thank you for the inspiring session. And thank you all for being here with us, for sharing this space and your thoughts. It has been also really enriching to get a sense of how all our Women's Informal Network members feel like. And if you have any ideas for further discussions or topics, please reach out to Chitra or to me, and we will be happy to organize something like that. Again, Sonia, thank you so much. We will be sharing the recorded video on our safe YouTube channel that Chitra is managing. So in our next update, we will also be sharing that. You can further share that with other friends if you feel that they could benefit from it. And with that, I would like to thank you all very much. And I hope to see you soon, either in person at one of our aperitivi or at the book club or other sessions that are coming up. All the best to you. Bye.
Thank you. Have a lovely afternoon, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.